Well, do you think that the Taiwan invasion, we're talking earlier about something that causes a break that overnight cuts off that kind of economic access to China. Do you think a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be the thing that would spark that kind of break?
So I used to, but I think when Xi Jinping put Wang Huning in charge of, of bringing Taiwan back into the fold, I think that was the very, very good strategic move, because I think the what Wang Huning is going to make the is going to try to make the case is that the Taiwan's not worth fighting for. It's an internal thing, and he's gonna use the same tools that he's used before to get us not to do anything about the Uyghurs, right? So or about Hong Kong. It's about economic and financial. It's about climate change. It's about North Korea. It's about all the cooperation that China can give to the West. So why do you want to destroy that over Taiwan? I mean, come on, they've made the arguments before, and I see them basically gearing up, and that's why Wang Huning I think is such a good choice for being the guy that says it, because hey, we're gonna play this so that at the end of the day, all of these very elite billionaires in the West say, let's look away for a little bit. That'll be cleaned up, and then we'll get right back to business. I think that's what they're setting up to do. So, I was hopeful for a while that they would be a little bit more aggressive, and then that would enable this clean economic break. Now I'm starting to wonder, like, okay, the Smile campaign that's happened since the 20th Party Congress and everything that's gone on since just tells me that Wang Huning has a strategy to basically say, hey, you turn your head for the Uyghurs, you turn your head for Hong Kong, you turn your head for all these things. Why not just do it again? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, you made some excellent points earlier about the rise and consolidation of corporate power in the U.S. and how that influences China policy. But what should we be doing then, right now, so we don't have to deal with the Taiwan red line issue? What can we do to uh, to to fight? Because you talked about China looks at the war as an ideological and economic war. So what, let's say we shift the battle. The United States shifts the battlefield to economic and ideological. What can we do for that right now?
Well, so I mean, there's some really interesting things that have happened since, and it's not just about globalization; it's also about the internet and the consolidation of media. So now all media is corporate media. We used to have local papers. We used to have, the voices, of 1,000 different newspaper editors that could, bring their own personal values into things. All of that has gone away, and so that consolidation of corporate power has meant a consolidation of narrative power in the West, with the internet and the destruction of what I would say local media. Now you're starting to see some of that come back with just kind of independent journalists just doing their thing on social media, but that can be drowned out pretty quickly, and then those people can be canceled. They could just be eliminated off the platform. So this has to be pretty sophisticated. Really has to do with disentangling the large tech companies and the media companies from the average American voice. And so I one of the things that I thought when I was in the White House is this idea of open data in the West is a big problem, because it's free to be collected and cataloged and used by anybody for the influence of people, and that's what primarily the tech companies did. They used it to make money, to make themselves very wealthy, and to accumulate power, economic power. But the Chinese Communist Party just then leveraged that to go on social and political and cultural and all those other things, and basically create the narratives they want. And then we saw during COVID that the West started to embrace a lot of those ideas. So it goes beyond economics; it goes in the social, the political, and the cultural. Okay, I believe that data is the thing that allows you, and really data about you, your data. The idea that it can be used and used to understand you, understand your perceptions, intentions, behaviors, I think is a big problem for democracies. I think the fact that you can basically have Kalia and FISA and all these things, this ability to look, basically hit a DVR rewind button on your life and say, government have to be able to have this data to see what you're doing and then furthermore, to use AI to begin to manipulate, like ByteDance does with its algorithms, I think that's the problem that's one of the big problems from a technology standpoint we need to solve. And so, to me, the way you deal with that is you begin to imbue privacy and data security and data sovereignty into our infrastructure in a way that protects the you know the ownership of that data about you, your data. And so that's the thing that I think I've continued to think, as we figure out how do we, so getting corporate America out of China and getting our financial system out of China is easy. How do we start to disentangle this one corporate narrative and start to allow for many voices to rise? You have to take away the ability for people to be silenced, either by the government or large tech companies, and you have to give them the power to have their own voice and having control over their own data. So this is the thing that I think is very, very important.
Well, this is interesting because earlier you said what the U.S. really needs is like in the Cold War, a strong statesman to just come out and say the Chinese Communist Party is evil. And certainly a lot of people who have been in your position, a military man, advisor to the government, a lot of these people go into politics. But you chose a different route. You're the CEO of Sempre, you're this digital infrastructure company. And so it seems like you're focusing on something very different, this sort of what you were just talking about, the need for... Why did you decide to choose digital infrastructure as your focus?
Well, 2 Christmases ago, AT&T Switching Center in Nashville got bombed, took down telecommunications in Tennessee and surrounding states for several weeks. And so, what I realized when I was in the White House was our infrastructure is extremely vulnerable to attack. So it's not just about our data; it's the ability to have continued communications to reach first responders, or make a financial transaction, like to go buy milk. How do you pay for it? Or your get health services. So these are all things that are absolutely critical. I don't know if you know this, but not too long ago, the federal government went out and hardened all the AM stations in the country for against attack, like nuclear attack. But then you look like, who has an AM radio? Nobody does. Everybody has their smartphone, and what we found at Semper is that those smartphones are resilient to just about everything. You can drop them in water, you throw them against a wall, and you can even have a high altitude electromagnetic pulse, which is basically a detonation of a nuclear weapon or a very powerful solar flare, which can take down our infrastructure. Your phone works just fine, but you have nothing to connect to. And so we believed, or I believed that if you could create infrastructure that would make that connection happen and keep that connection going, then you would start to get some of these problems like happen after Hurricane Katrina, for example, where civil society breaks down quite rapidly because you don't have communication. You don't have a way to get services to people. People don't have a way to get help and make financial transactions. And so it starts there. It starts with the resiliency that's needed in our infrastructure. And then as you build that out, you begin to build in the ability for the American people to take back control of their data, because they have this infrastructure that not only is hardened, but it's also secure. And so understanding how to use encryption that protects your data from being used by tech companies or being used by, in the case of the Chinese Communist Party, a state who wants to change your intentions, perceptions, or behaviors, I think is the thing that we see as a long-term vision. And at least I did from a technology standpoint. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in the economic, the financial, and the political, but the social and cultural is really embedded today in the digital. And so part and parcel of that is control over your data, so that your social and political beliefs cannot be manipulated by those from outside the country, or tech companies that have an ulterior motive. I mean, really, this corporate media is not, doesn't have American interests in mind. They have corporate interests in mind.
You're talking about a sort of hardware strengthening solution or hardware resiliency in terms of making sure that your phone can be still connected to a network in case of a disaster or an EMP or nuclear detonation. But what about in terms of like what are software solutions for dealing with the data privacy issue? Because that's not just a hardware thing, right?
No, it very much is a software thing, but you have to get the hardware in first, and then the software rides on top of that. And primarily, it's an encryption thing. It's having your data be encrypted. I think we have tended to think of encryption as the purview of the federal government, and I believe encryption ought to be the purview of every American system. Like your ability to encrypt your data is a fundamental human right, so that you can have the ability to live the kind of life that you want. Now, if the government thinks that you're guilty of some crime, that doesn't mean they should all of a sudden have access to all your encrypted data. Have them go and place bugs just like they've always had to do. Have them go and actually do the investigative work. Don't allow them to press the easy button because they have full access to your data. I think that's where we went wrong in the Patriot Act, and I think that's where I would say we need, as a democracy, as a republic, constitutional republic, draw the line between federal government access to your data and their need to prevent crime. If they need to prevent crime, then they can go get a warrant, and then they can start planting bugs, and they can start doing investigative stuff just like they used to.
Well, I think what this all comes down to is, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, was talking about how China presents a whole of society approach. And for all of the things we've been talking about, there are a lot of barriers to American society as a whole, as a society realizing the Chinese Communist Party is a threat.
Right. Yeah, it is, and it's part and parcel to the global narrative, and I think that's the problem. And if we don't go after that with vigor, and we don't recognize that the world has changed in fundamental ways that our founding fathers had no really concept of, the internet. Come on, how would they even understand that? If we don't understand these things and we don't reconcile them, and we don't begin to go about remediating them, we're on a downward slope to disaster.
Fortunately, there's still a few independent local newspaper editors or their equivalents, like, for example, Chris Chappell.
Like Chris Chappell and Matt.
Hey, I've already said I want to become emperor. So.
Well, that's off then. Never mind.
We're doomed. So I guess
We're doomed.
We're doomed. How do you then get any kind of red line in a society like this that's deeply enmeshed in business relationships with China, that there's no political will, especially after we've seen how craven the Blinken and Yellen trip to China was. It seems like, they go to Taiwan, they blow through that, they just keep pushing, and there is no red line.
So, I mean, look, it is doing things like you're doing on China Uncensored. It's really just trying to speak truth to power and allowing people to, remove the blinders from their eyes, and then in their own way begin to go about and make change. We did not have a majority of Americans that supported the Revolutionary War. We had a few people that were just fed up and committed to something different. And America has always ever been so. You're not going to see a majority go after this, but everybody kind of sees the problem, that begins to go after the problem in their own way, in their local communities, or whether they run for office or whether they do something like you with China Uncensored, is the way that we're going to get out of it. And then once you start to basically turn the tide, I believe that we can begin to fix things. But so I am hopeful. It's not. I don't want to be known as Dr. Doom, but we have to be serious about it. We have to be serious minded, and we have to. I loved what Robert Kennedy Jr. said yesterday. In his testimony, it's like we need to have freedom of speech, and not just freedom for good speech, freedom from something that you don't want to hear, because it may be the thing that saves you.
And didn't they try to censor him at that censorship conference?
Absolutely. that's the crazy thing of
Yeah.
this is the new America.
Well, so I mean, the audience watching this, these are people who are definitely interested and passionate and aware of the problem. What would your advice be to them? Because if you tell them to run for office, it's going to butt heads with me when I try to become emperor.
Well, again, I think like I decided to go after the technology side of things. I think, there's literally a million ways that you can make a difference. It starts with understanding, what reality is, or having a better understanding what reality is versus vis-a-vis the Chinese Communist Party and the own failings of our own system. And then you go out, they're like Catherine Gale. I don't know if you know who she is, but she started this Institute for Political Innovation, and she really believes in Final Five voting and open primaries. And I think, having people like that to go about things in their own way because they see a problem, they want to fix the system, I think is the only way that we're going to solve it. And me dictating how that is, I would rather give you the means to understand what the problem is. And this is what I've done so many times very successfully in large organizations, is it's really about awareness. And everybody then, in a free society can go out and attack the problem in their own way. And I think that's what's great about our system. It is really everybody has different idea, a different way of going about it. And then they go about and they create momentum around that idea. And I think, that's what's going to save us, not, me, being able to give a prescription for how this very much, because of our system, because of who we are, has to become from the grassroots, and it has to, to use a Chinese Communist Party thing. We got to let 1,000 flowers bloom.